So yesterday, we did a video on a player that's as close to a must-land for the Florida Gators as there possibly is, and five-star defensive back #1 player in the state of Florida, Cormani McClain. And today, we're going to be taking that same ideology and applying it to the Alabama Crimson Tide and talking about two players who are as close to must-land for the Crimson Tide as there is. And of course, today, we're talking about the two in-state five-star defensive linemen, Peter Woods and James Smith. We're going to be breaking down that and why Alabama recruiting has been so phenomenal. Before we do, though, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe Alabama lands at least one of the duo of Peter Woods and James Smith? Let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, like and comment down below. And I want to see if we can get 30 subscribers from this video alone by Wednesday. And if we do, I'll be getting another person. We'll be doing a joint video on the Crimson Tide that I know you'll love. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And first and foremost, we're going to start this off with how insane Alabama recruiting has been. Because last cycle, Alabama had some misses on the defensive line and still ended up with the #2 recruiting class in the nation that just so happened to field the highest average player rank in all of high school football recruiting, even higher than the Texas A&M class that broke the record for the all-time greatest recruiting class in 24/7 sports and in every major recruiting outlet history. So, Alabama, even in a year where they experienced misses, was still able to recruit at a level that most institutions can only dream of, which, in my opinion, really highlights the absurdity that has been Alabama Crimson Tide recruiting. This is an absolute machine where even when they experience some misses, they're still recruiting on a level that other people envy, and that right there is truly incredible to me. But now, let's focus forward on the two prospects we're going to be talking about today, James Smith and Peter Woods, because both of these individuals are as close to must-land prospects as you could find for the Alabama Crimson Tide, in my opinion, especially with some of the misses Alabama sustained on the defensive line in recruiting last cycle. Still grabbing phenomenally talented prospects, but knowing there was more that could have been done. And this year is a fantastic opportunity for the Crimson Tide, as Alabama is loaded with defensive line talent. In fact, if we look at the top 15 defensive linemen in the nation, 6 of them reside in Alabama, and all of which come in as top 150 players in all of high school football, painting the picture that Alabama is in a great position even if they simply recruited their state on the defensive line, a position most institutions would love to find themselves in. But now, what is it about Peter Woods and James Smith that make them must-get prospects? And if you turn on the film, it's fairly easy to understand why. Both of these guys have rare ability, and if you're able to get them both, I think it really serves you well, and especially for the Crimson Tide, as they're trying to maintain that ferocious defensive front they've been able to field for years on end, and players such as Peter Woods and James Smith are exactly how you can maintain that ferocity. Everything in football starts and ends in the trenches, and if you cannot dominate that area, you're inevitably making the job of everybody else around you more difficult, leading to the possibility of more mistakes. So making sure your trenches are real strong has got to be an area of utmost importance. So what do the Crimson Tide have going in their favor in the pursuit of James Smith and Peter Woods? And let's start with this list. First and foremost, both guys are in-state prospects, meaning they get to stay home and play for their home state school, which could be a big thing if being in close proximity to their family matters to the prospect. The second thing is the rate of development Alabama fields with five-star prospects alone. Forget about which position they play, just 5 stars in and of themselves. Alabama has been on another level in development with 5 stars and sending them to the first round of the NFL draft. And then comes defensive linemen, which we've seen countless times, and Alabama Crimson Tide defensive linemen step up to the plate for 1 year, have a sensational year, and then find themselves as a high-value draft pick in the NFL draft, carving out a successful career at the next level of football. So Alabama has got a lot going for them. They have the coaches, they have the recruiters, recruiters, they have the development, and you know they're going to be competing for national championships on a year-in, year-out basis, not to mention they're the home state school. So it truly is the perfect recipe, and that's why the Crimson Tide must land at least one of these prospects. Because the last thing you want is for the end of the year to look at your state and see that the 2 5-star defensive linemen that resided in your state are not going to Alabama, that they've chose to play their college football elsewhere. That's the last position the Crimson Tide wants to find themselves in. And if we dive further into the details of Alabama's pursuit of Peter Woods and James Smith, we can find more intriguing details. And if we start with Peter Woods, what we find is Alabama has been incredibly successful at recruiting Thompson High School. Last cycle alone, they pulled 2 prospects in Jeremiah Alexander and Traquan Fegans that I know Alabama fan base are incredibly excited to see. So they have a connection to that high school that they feel very good about. And there are other prospects in this cycle alone that go to that high school that are going to make it a major priority for the Crimson Tide. And in the case of James Smith, Alabama hasn't landed a prospect from Carver High School in Montgomery, Alabama since 2016 when they landed Mac Wilson from that same high school. And though I don't feel like that plays any bearing at all in this recruitment battle, it is just something that I found a little bit interesting and wanted to share. But at the end of the day, for there to be 2 5-star defensive linemen in your state, 2 guys that bring next level ability, you want to land at least one of them. And in a perfect world, the Crimson Tide would walk away from this situation with both of them. Because the Crimson Tide have a little bit of luxury this year in the sense that they have 6 of the top 15 defensive linemen residing in their state. And so they don't have to go very far to try and be in the battle for top defensive linemen, something Alabama doesn't struggle with anyways. So this is going to be incredibly interesting to see as Alabama pursues 2 defensive linemen that I find to be as close to must-land prospects as there are. That's it. See ya.